Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. This is Wessel van den Berg here from Equimundo. And just to say, we're still waiting a few minutes for a few more participants to join us. We'll get going shortly with the rest of the webinar. Okay, I think let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Bienvenido, welcome. My name is Wessel van den Berg from Equimundo, working on the MenCare Global Fatherhood campaign. And I'm very happy to welcome everybody to this webinar. This webinar is the first in a series that will highlight the recommendations of the upcoming State of the World's Fathers report for 2023. And we will be following the recommendations of the report as they are, each of them match a different letter on the acronym CARING, C-A-R-I-N-G. So just checking if we can go to the next slide, please. So today we're starting with the C, which is centering care systems and policies in public institutions while focusing on the most marginalized. And as we move through the year, we will do a webinar that is attached to each of the letters in the word caring. So just to delve into today's webinar and the reason that we are starting with this one, currently no government counts unpaid care and domestic work as part of its gross domestic product or national revenue. And only a handful have initiated national care plans. Most care policies are not comprehensive or joined up, but focus on only one aspect like parental leave or childcare or healthcare. And all too often, any focus on care does not look at care equality and the involvement of men and boys. I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and the person was saying that this is not only an individual problem. We can all do more as systemically. So that is a big part of what we're going to be talking about today. We are focusing on the overarching issue of centering care systems in the policies and the public institutions that influence people's lives profoundly. And we will also discuss the implications of involving men in this broader debate. I really hope that you can also join us for the rest of the webinars throughout the year. And that is my introduction. Let me, without any further ado, hand over to our moderator, Diana McCauley. I'm very happy to introduce Diana. Diana has over 10 years experience in the development sector, having worked under government development agencies, local and international NGOs, and currently working for Sonke Gender Justice. Diana holds a Master of Science in Public Health and a postgrad diploma in Project and Organizational Management. She's a skilled business development and programs manager and has implemented various programs in health and social development with a focus on child protection and responsive parenting. Diana will moderate our webinar today. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Vessel. Colleagues from across the globe, welcome to the first of 6 sessions of the Caring webinar series, which will highlight the strategic recommendations from the State of the Fathers 2023 report. As guided today, we're focusing on the C acronym, on centering care systems in policies and public institutions, focused on the most marginalized. Please note that we do have simultaneous translation available in Spanish with the kind support of Global Alliance for Care. Kindly click on the interpretation button in Zoom, which is the little button, the world button right at the bottom of your screen, and be sure to adjust the translations throughout the call as you may require. Please also add your questions using the Q&A button, and the webinar will be recorded and slides will be made available in PDF afterwards. So allow me to take you through today's agenda. Can we please go to the third slide on the agenda? Thank you very much. So there we go. Okay, so we'll start with introducing the MenCare Global Fatherhood campaign. We will go on to a global perspective on movements mobilizing for care, which will be paneled by Valencia Zenderas. We'll have Gary Barker from Equimundo give us insight on the global progress towards involving men and gender equal care. We'll then have Vessel come on board and lead us through evidence to action on MenCare 50/50 commitments. Thereafter, we'll have the panel discussions. We'll open up to the audience and we'll close this call with announcements from Tavishi Gupta, Director of Research at Equimundo. Thank you so much, colleagues. Just heads up if you could hear me loud and clear as well. Thank you. So allow me to introduce you to the MenCare Global campaign and our team. Thank you. Well, we got that. Thank you very much for the slide. Great. So the MenCare is a global fatherhood campaign active in more than 65 countries in 5 continents. It's coordinated by Equimundo Center for Masculinities and Social Justice, formerly known as Promundo US, and Sonke Gender Justice, a South African NGO which is fast growing across sub-Saharan African region. Our mission is to promote men's involvement in equitable, non-violent fathers and caregivers in order to achieve family well-being, gender equality, and better health for mothers, fathers, and children. I'm happy to introduce you to our MenCare Global team co-coordinators. I will start by way of introduction by requesting that each of our coordinators, each of us, share the roles that we have in our organizations and what we focus on with the MenCare campaign, and also bring on board some personal connection to MenCare. Allow me to start with Tavishi. Tavishi, come through, please.
Thank you so much, Diana, and it's such a pleasure to be here today. My name is Dr. Tavishi Gupta. I am the Director of Research Evaluation and Learning at Equimundo, and I'm one of the MenCare Global Co-Coordinators alongside Vessel, Diana, and Empo. I play the role, as my colleagues do, on thinking about global strategy, the logistics, the operations under Vessel's leadership, who's the MenCare officer. And one of my personal connections to MenCare is that much like many other people, I think we really understand the meaning and the value of equitable caregiving once we have children. And since about 7.5 years ago, when I had my first child, I think the recognition that I really couldn't do the kind of parenting I wanted to do and have the kind of mental health for myself, for my child, until I had my partner be there for me in an equal way, spend time with my child, take on the role of parenting beyond just, what is expected culturally from fathers. I think just kind of really feeling that in a lived experience way was probably enough for me to feel like this is something, a worthy cause for us to kind of be behind. So it's a simple way for me to have joined MenCare by becoming a parent myself, but also recognizing how many women all over the world need this equitable caregiving in order to thrive. So passing this on to Vessel next, or Diana, whoever you think should go next. But yeah, it's my pleasure to be here for this webinar. Thank you everybody for being here.
She mother, researcher, partner, but balancing everything within this care economy. Thank you very much. Over to Vessel, and Vessel, please pass over to Mpho once you're done.
Thank you, Diana. Hi again, everybody. My name is Wessel van den Berg, and I am the MenCare officer at Equimundo. I coordinate the MenCare Global Fatherhood campaign, and I focus on mostly dealing with partnerships and when new partners join, also supporting the governance structure that we have in place as the Partners Council, and then increasingly more and more now working with local partners on the MenCare Global advocacy agenda. And I'll share some of that a little bit later on. A personal connection that I have is, of course, being a father, and also being a child to a father, and thinking through my own personal intergenerational experience of fatherhood between my father and also with my daughter and my son. Yeah, let me stop there. The personal is certainly political. Let me pass over to Mpho, and then I don't want to skip you as well, and we should also keep you a slot for you, but I'll pass over to Mpho. Over to you, Mpho.
Thank you so much, Vessel. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, my bandwidth is a bit low, so I'll keep my video off for now because I'm scared I might get cut off. My name is Mpho Mapena Lunga, and I work at Sonke Gender Justice as a coordinator. And I also wear another cap as one of the MenCare Global Co-Coordinators, where I work with Diana, Vessel, and Tavishi. I am excited to be here and really looking forward to this series of webinars that we are currently going to be hosting. A personal connection is that I am a mother to two beautiful girls, and the connection I have on fatherhood is the amazing gift that fathers always bring towards the upbringing of their children, and how wonderful that really it brings to the wellness of the children. So I'm happy to be here, and I want to hand back to Diana.
Thank you very much, Mpho and Vessel. My name is Diana Macaulay. I am co-unit manager on Sonke's regional programs unit for Sub-Saharan Africa. I am also lead on the MenCare programming for Sonke Gender Justice. Personal connection, I'm also co-coordinator, as is Vessel, Tavishi, and Mpho, working under the great leadership of each and every one of you on the co-coordination for Global MenCare campaign. My personal experience with MenCare, I am a mother. I'll take this from the angle of being a daughter and a caregiver of senior citizens. I will not use the word geriatric. I don't think my mother would appreciate that, but yes, fits the bill. And also an active contributor in my community, where I share my experiences and knowledge on masculinities, gender equality. So that is the cascade of work. And I think from each and every one of our introductions, you can see how the office or your marketplace, your career has an integral position in your life. And then we have balancing how, you know, our responsibilities, our roles and responsibilities in the family and in the community. And I suppose this is what governs part of the conversations on MenCare as a global campaign. Thank you so much. Kindly move to the 6th slide, and I will just take colleagues further into history of MenCare. MenCare was launched in 2021, and we have a vision. The global vision for MenCare is men doing 50% of daily unpaid care work globally. We have partners in 65 countries at the moment, fast growing yet again. And we work out of the MenCare guiding principles, which have 4 strategic areas, and that's advocacy, communications, programs, and research. Controller, please go to the 9th slide. Thank you. In advocacy, we have 2 main advocacy initiatives: the MenCare 50-50 commitments for employers, MenCare 50-50 commitment for government departments. Vessel, I'm sure, will take us through at some point in this session. For communications, we disperse the MenCare newsletter periodically, and we also hold webinars such as this one and the next 5 to come, because there's 6 in this series. And we have a collection of different MenCare films from across the world. So inviting you actually to delve into our MenCare website, and here you'll be able to find the wealth of content that we're working out of. Programmatically, we work through 3 main programs or approaches: the Program P, the Banda Behero, and MenCare East Southern Africa Parenting Program. Research-wise, we, as MenCare Global, develop the State of the World's Fathers reports, and programmatically as well with our researchers, we contribute and actually lead on the state of the different countries' fathers reports. Thank you very much, colleagues. So that's just a snippet of MenCare, but like I said earlier, we're inviting you to delve onto our website and explore and discover and sign up, please. Thank you. Colleagues, please allow me to hand over to Valentina Zenderas. She's our first panelist. She is Technical Secretary of Global Care Alliance. She's an activist and gender equality specialist with 2 decades of experience working in feminist organizations to position care in public agenda. Valentina, are you there? Are you connected?
Yes, I'm here, Diane. Thank you very much.
Awesome, I can hear you.
Thank you, and thank you, Diane, and thank you to Equimundo and the MenCare team for inviting the Global Alliance for Care to be in this webinar today. I am going to switch to Spanish now. So please, if your preferred language is English, I remind you to activate the interpretation by clicking on the world icon that is on the Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen and selecting English. Thank you. Bueno.
Hello. As I was saying, I'm now in Spanish. The GAC is a global multi-stakeholder initiative launched by the National Institute of Women in Mexico, in Mujeres by its Spanish acronym, and UN Women in the context of the 2021 Generation Equality Forum. In 2021, you might recall that year, we were right in the midst of the pandemic. So it was quite evident how the existing organization in terms of caregiving was not sufficient for people requiring care. It was also very unfair for gender equity. So the GAC called upon governments, NGOs, international organizations, civil society organizations, the private sector, the public sector, philanthropic organizations, so they would be acting in a coordinated manner in very concrete actions to reduce inequalities and promote a cultural change in the caregiving work, for it to be recognized, for it to be redistributed, for it to be paid work. For people who are caring for other people, so that those people are represented in all the decision-making process related to caregiving. For the GAC, it's very important for us to see care as a public good, acknowledge the overload of care work for women and the impact of their economic autonomy. Economic autonomy is of the utmost importance. We have to recognize the labor rights of caregivers. Why are we talking about labor rights? Because we want to promote the co-responsibility of all sectors in care. That's why we're talking about economic autonomy. We have to have co-responsibility among all the sectors, as I have said, in the caregiving activities, and also gender equity, men, women, and people, and everyone who is participating in this process. Now, the next slide, please. After 2 years of our work, we have 121 members representing national and local governments. We're now participating to move forward in the construction of caregiving societies. Right in the center, we have caring for people, for persons. And the GAC is working in 4 different axes or strategies. One has to do with learning. And as all the instances of GAC, we can learn best practices, we can share data, knowledge, information to inspire other people, for us to continue transforming the way in which we provide caregiving activities throughout the world through a strategy of resilience, for caregiving to be right in the center of the agendas, because we want caregiving to be considered as a fundamental topic for development at the national, international levels. And we also have another strategy aimed at transforming cultures, cultural transformation, for us to be able to change stereotypes. The next one, please. And Diana, over to you for the next question, please.
Thank you very much, Valentina. So how do you think men can best contribute to this work?
Thank you, Diana. Sí, desde nuestra perspectiva.
From our perspective, there are so many ways in which men can contribute and participate to do this redistribution of caregiving activities in a co-responsible fashion. If we could go on to slide 3 slides ahead, please, 3 slides. One more, please. That's it. One before this one, please. The 3 ways in which we see how men can participate redistribute caregiving activities. First, individually, as individuals. This is something that MenCare is really highlighting in its MenCare campaign, for men to see themselves as responsible for care work within their households, in their families, but also in their communities, in their societies, for men to take upon themselves this responsibility, and for men to be able to contribute towards really caring for their loved ones. And that's why this MenCare campaign is so important. At least 50% of the caregiving work is in the hands of men. And this is one of the main items of the campaign. And also in problem-solving resolutions and problem-solving activities, how to relate to other people. That's also very important. That's why it's also very important to see the work, many organizations like yours, to promote different types of models, masculinities, that are centered on nonviolence and cooperation and equality. So this is a first level of engagement. The second level has to do with men as organizers and mobilizers, activists. Men can go over and beyond personal reflections and individual transformation. Men can do so much more than that, to have political incidence, impact, to transform the way in which other men are relating to women, to caregiving activities, and to their societies and organizations. So we invite men to incorporate the caregiving agenda in their own causes, for men to open spaces so that there are other organizations that may also have a visible voice to promote the right to caregiving, and the right people have to receive care of high quality. Now, the third item has to do with policy and decision makers. Those men that are making decisions are political responsible men, politically responsible. There are so many actions they can implement. Men in the private sector as well. They can promote representation and the participation of different groups that haven't had a voice, so that those voices are now heard in political decisions, but also promoting public policies to promote societies of equity, of justice in caregiving. Caregiving structures are also very important. And men that are in the private sector have so many spaces where they can participate inside, for instance, companies, for those companies to have co-responsibility policies, and for those companies to have social responsibility activities and programs, so that we can promote caregiving activities with equity, with social justice. There are so many things men contribute with in caregiving, so many things they can be the center of, really. And Diana, I think there's one more question. I give you the floor, Diana, for the next question. Please, Diana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Valentina, I'll have to hold you right there for now, but extremely interesting conversation. Of course, the men's contribution as individuals, their contribution at community level, and how important it is for men to contribute to promote equity and equity in structures. I think that stands out very, very, very well. I'll hold you right there. Allow me to move on to our next panelist.
Sorry, Diana.
Yes, go ahead, Vessel.
So sorry, I was just I saw Valentina's slide on just the global progress towards centering care. So it's just the previous slide. If you don't mind, Diana, could we just focus on that one briefly? So Valentina, please. It's just to highlight to us that the progress on how are we doing in manifesting a care economy. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Diana and Vessel.
Yes, thank you, Diana and Vessel. That is right. This is, I'm going to go very fast on this slide, but let me tell you, for many decades, the feminist movement started positioning caregiving issues as a central element for everyone, really, for economies and societies, for the planet. And this has made it visible, and this started an entire movement throughout the world. And for many years, we've had the participation of different movements, other social movements. For instance, the movement of the rights of people with disabilities, of older persons, and also the participation of children. They have stressed the right to accessible and quality care. And this has been of the utmost importance, and also at the global level, guaranteeing or ensuring social justice, gender equalities, and work and sustainable development on an international scale, and the participation of everyone in public policies. So caregiving is an ever-present topic in all types of debates, gender equity, dignified work, and many other debates. And we are considering this in SDGs, for instance, and also in the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, and also the Convention on the Rights of Children and the rights of people with disabilities as well. This is international. ILO agreements are also including this very important issue. So we have so many international documents, international accords, agreements talking about the need of ensuring a caregiving that is of high quality and dignified caregiving, but it's also very important to say that it's also necessary for the right to caregiving to be recognized globally as a human right, and for it to be internationally recognized, for us to really be able to focus caregiving and international organizations and all their different decisions throughout all the regions of the world. Now, which are the practices that are now being implemented? We can say there's progress being made in the promotion of the agenda. We have progress being made in the different regions, but this is not enough. This is very uneven. This is insufficient for us to be able to guarantee high quality caregiving and for people to be getting the right care and for the caregivers to be cared for as well. The national governments have now become responsible for guaranteeing, for ensuring high quality caregiving activities. Local governments are also participating. Regional governments are implementing actions, and MCAT establishing caregiving with very high quality activities. So governments have to decisively invest in infrastructure for caregiving. They have to implement standards guaranteeing the necessary scheme for the caregiving actions. And governments will also have to continue building policies through social dialogue and citizens' participation. And there are still not many countries that have reached this level of commitment to ensure the organization of caregiving. And I'm talking about fair, just caregiving to transform the labor conditions as well. We have to make this visible. We have to make visible all the cases where important progress has been made. And I wanted to share with you only 3 cases of many more cases we have in the world. Those 3 cases of different regions of the world. For instance, let me start out with a German case. There, unpaid caregivers are legally recognized and offer courses to professionalize their care work and support. This is official recognition. And those courses are very important because they can make the caregiving work a lot more professional. They have social security, they have pensions, they have unemployment insurance as well. And this is a great trend in Germany, but also in other countries. We're starting to recognize the work done by caregivers. They were unpaid before, but now they are being paid and they require to be paid. They require a salary and for their rights to be respected. The second case I wanted to share with you is the Bogota case. This is in Colombia. It has been a paradigm case because they've implemented a care system in Colombia, offering a very broad variety of resources, services as well. For instance, home relay services for caregivers. Most of the women in Colombia can have some time for themselves so that they can leave their caregiving activities and devote that time for themselves. So there's the relay service. That's what I mean when I say relay. Those caregivers are being relayed by others so they can have access to free time. You know, free time is a human right and it's quite a scarce resource for women. There are support programs for caregivers in Colombia, cultural change campaigns, and also campaigns for men, so that men can learn how to be caregivers. And this is a way of looking at it. This is something men haven't done historically. So it's important for men to be involved in caregiving activities. And this is a very important characteristic in Bogota. They have an urban planning process in Bogota, and this is focused on caregiving. In some areas, they divide, they have mapped out the city, who needs which care, how long do the caregivers have to be going or traveling to get to the point where they are doing their caregiving work. In South Korea, there are also very important programs for the elderly and even for young people who have special care needs. And those services are offered according to a diagnosis, according to very specific caregiving needs of each person, as I have said. Well, this is all I wanted to say. I wanted to show you these 3 cases: Germany, Bogota, Colombia, and South Korea. Thank you so much. Back to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Very, very enlightening. So caregiving is a multi-sectoral issue. And we also do have expectations on the government to transform care economy in various sectors, looking at the care economy or caregiving as an issue that cross-cuts social justice, gender equality, decent work, sustainable development on an international scale. Thank you so much. Very interesting reflections. Please allow me to introduce our next panel discussant, Gary Barker, who is CEO and co-founder of Equimundo Care Center for Masculinities and Social Justice, formerly Promundo. He is co-founder of MenCare Global Fatherhood Campaign and co-founder of MenEngage Global. Gary, are you there?
Hey, Diana, how are you? Yes, definitely here. Would not miss this.
Awesome. So, Gary, handing over to you, kindly share what your analysis on global progress towards involving men in gender equal caregiving is.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be in this conversation with the colleagues and co-creators of MenCare when we started it back in 2011, and a pleasure as well to be here with colleagues from the Global Alliance for Care. I was pleased that you started off the conversation of why are we here. This is more than just a academic or advocacy topic for all of us, right? This is the personal and the political. I feel privileged and responsible as a father, a partner, an uncle, a son caring for an elderly mother and elderly parents during the COVID moment. These issues, they resonate in my daily life. And I was part of the initial team with Sonke and Promundo US back then when we created this MenCare process. And in addition to it being a slogan for a campaign, it is also, for my life at least these past 12 years, it's been a mantra of affirming men care. We can, we must. And more than once in my own household, if my daughter and partner used it as an affirmation and an enjoiner to me of, hello, are you doing your part? Men care. So I'm part of it. And I think in addition to being a caregiver, I would say I'm an all-purpose agitator, to borrow an expression of one of our board members on this topic. So where are we on this topic? As I think about since we started this, the conversations that led to it, where are we? I think we can say, with data that we have and will launch in the next State of the World's Fathers report coming out in about a month and a half, but other data as well, that men are doing more of the hands-on care work, at least as we measure it in time use surveys and we ask women and men about it. It does seem that men are doing more. There's huge gaps in some households, bigger gaps in some parts of the world, gaps between urban and rural, but there is something shifting. I don't think we can say men won't do care work. There are things driving men to do more. I think we can also say as perhaps the biggest policy change, more countries are offering more leave for male caregivers, and more men are taking that leave. It is still only a minority of men who have access to that leave. The gap of men employed or unemployed or making income in the informal sector, as it is for women in the informal sector, the access to leave or other kinds of cash support or social protection services is far too limited. So it continues, there's increase, but it is still a minority of the world's men. I also think importantly, the narratives are shifting. There are more things that we see, whether in the television or the streaming that we consume, advertising out there, conversations, male politicians, some men influencers. I think we see more of men doing the care work. We did a study last year together with the Gina Davis Institute, looking at how men's caregiving shows up in US television. We're all spending lots more time streaming television in many parts of the world. And so we did an analysis. How does men's caregiving show up? Interestingly, in the most watched shows and streamed shows in the US, Men's caregiving showed up almost as much as women's did. However, men often showed up as, rather incompetent, emotionally distant, and too often violent caregivers. Those are realities in our world. So in some ways, TV is reflecting who we are, but at the same time, it tells us there may be a need for the narratives that affirm men doing care in all of its kinds, not only in our nuclear households, our close households, but also our extended families, communities, and beyond. I think it's fair to say that more workplaces and corporate partners are paying attention to care, but again, there's still like a few examples, not nearly enough to make the kinds of changes we need for these to be global, and hence our MenCare 50/50 to drive on that. I think we could also say that COVID was a tremendous shock to care systems, a stress on it, but also a demand. Men were obliged to be at home. Lots of men, depending on the kind of work they did, where they couldn't be out, even if they worked outside the home, they couldn't spend as much time outside their homes as they did before. Men were obliged to do more care. That did not apparently reduce the care burden on women, but it did drive men, a lot of men around the world, to do new kinds and new amounts of care work at home and beyond. We don't know whether those changes have stuck, whether they continue, but it is important to acknowledge what a crisis did, the harm that it caused, but also the nudging, the obliging of some men to do more care. And I absolutely agree with Valentina, and I think Vessel made this point at the beginning, that care policies remain secondary globally in terms of social policies that we need, and that care receives far less investment than families need and want. We have a case of politicians not paying attention to what their voters are saying they need and want. And I think within that, we know that care equality, nudging, supporting, obligating men to do our share of care work is seldom considered in such policies. The next slide. I'm going to give you just a couple of hints together with the co-authors of the State of the World's Fathers report. I was given permission to share a few of our data points. One, there's a lot of data going on here, but the orange is women, the blue is men across a number of the countries included in the survey, and it's the gap in hours per day contributed to certain kinds of care work. The gap of the 17 countries that we have in the survey, and thanks to Tavishi, Nikki, Vessel, Brian from the Equimundo team, for the work on this. The gaps are decreasing, they seem to, as I mentioned before, in terms of the data. There are certainly big gaps, and we should not minimize those, particularly where there's lots of hands-on care for younger children. There's a bigger gap in terms of what men are doing compared to women in many countries, but the gap does seem to be narrowing. Men are at least telling us that they are doing more of the care work. Men's partners do not always affirm that exact amount. And so we have a lot to continue to push, but something is changing that at the very least men feel obliged to say, I do more of the care work. And we believe that that is a tremendous opportunity to push men even further, to make possible men doing the hands-on care work. Next slide, please. So what are the barriers? We often, I think, in our conversations around care work, we focus on the individual men or on households, when the barriers are structural. Again, this slide has lots of data points. We will have moments where we will share this in far greater detail. But as we asked households, what are the main reasons you don't have the care support you need? These are structural. This is because paid care is too expensive, the most common reason. There aren't enough publicly provided services, the second most common reason. I don't know about paid care options available to me, related, of course, to those first two. This fourth one, I feel it's my responsibility. That's what capitalism does to us, right? To make us all feel somehow we have to individually, or as a family, it's us against the world. That is also a structural issue. My partner's job is too demanding. That is a structural issue about the kinds of employment and the lack of support in the jobs that we work in. The hours of guaranteed paid leave were not enough. Again, a policy issue. I'm going to stop there because I could go through each one of those, but just to say, we've got to pay attention to the structures and systems. Yes, we must adjoin, we must remind. It is useful to me, it is useful to all of us to continue to push that men need to center care as individual men and collectively, but we also must think about how deeply structural this is as we look to the advocacy coming out of this report, as we look at what we do as MenCare. The next slide, please. I also want to talk about this as we think about, nudging men, supporting men, engaging men to do more of the care. We often, again, think of that individual or group change, but we need a whole radical revolution in the making of ideas about masculinities, that we reorient masculinities to be about care. And one of the most encouraging findings coming out of the study, and thank you to Tavishi for leading the thinking about this, is we ask questions about emotional care, the emotional care that men perceive they have for themselves and receive from others. And the overwhelming finding is that the more men are attuned to our emotional lives, the more we see ourselves as emotional, caring, vulnerable individuals, the more we care for others. As we shift cultures, this is about saying we care for men. We need to provide men the space to revolutionize ideas about masculinity so that men can see ourselves as vulnerable, as in need of emotional care. And as we pay attention to that, we tend to pay attention to the care we need to provide others around them. And I think that helps us get beyond an either or. Do we support services for women and girls? Do we support conversations about men and boys? This finding says it's and, that we can do both. We can care about men from a feminist lens, and that care pays forward. The final slide. Oh, did I lose my final slide? Should be one before there, or no? Nope. Oh no. Okay. Where do we go next? That's a good way to keep me short. If I may have 45 seconds more, just to say, I absolutely underline Valentina's point about engaging men to be activists for this. We need the hands-on care work, but as the barriers, the change that we need are structural, we absolutely need men on board as activists together with the women allies who have led this for so long. As we finished and are finalizing this year's State of the World's Fathers report, if you'll allow me just kind of a final comment, we framed it as caregiving in a planet in crisis. As we look at the war in Ukraine, as we look at the ongoing effects of COVID, as we look at the climate crisis, it almost feels like hands-on caregiving feels like such a tiny, unimportant issue. But we do feel that it's part of achieving the world that we're after. And I was inspired, or I am regularly inspired by a phrase from Andurati Roy, the Indian author and activist, and she says, "Another world is possible. I hear her whispering in my ear all the time. In the quiet moments, she speaks to me." And I very much love, I don't think if I got that quote exactly right, but I love this idea of if we focus on the care that we need around us as individuals, I think it can turn us into the collective care for the planet and for the greater collective good that we need. I'm inspired by all of you all in this conversation and look forward to more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Amazing. Yes, another world is possible. And I just want to zero back in on your comment on radical revolution on masculinities and how the structural limitations are propagating the unequal care economy. Sharing that and linking that to Valentina's previous conversation. Thank you so much, Gary. Very, very insightful. Colleagues, kindly remember to post your questions, use the Q&A box. Note down any reflections as we'll have a session after Vessel. Allow me to invite Vessel Vanderberg to the panel. Vessel works as MenCare officer at Equimundo. He's also the father of 2 young children and sees fatherhood as his primary job. His curiosity about men and care led him to work as a kindergarten teacher, a counselor, an activist, and researcher. He is also co-founder of MenCare Global Fatherhood campaign and the State of South Africa Fathers Report series. Vessel, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Diana. Thank you. Thank you so much once again. Hi, everybody.
Great. So Vessel, kindly tell us about the MenCare 50/50 commitments.
Sure. Thank you so much, Diana. And Gary, it seems like Google was swallowing up one of the slides there. I just reactivated it, but I think we'll share it in the slide deck when we send out the slides afterwards. I think just for everybody to know that we will post a webinar page on the website, and all of the resources will be there, the slides and the links to the reports that we're mentioning, etc. So yeah, I would love to tell you about the MenCare 50/50 commitment. And this is an initiative that I think complements what Valentina and Gary were saying also in terms of this structural changes that are needed. Much of the emphasis is often on me as an individual to change, and that I think that is really important as a man, to take accountability for my my role in a household or in a relationship. But I am also dependent on the workplace that I work at, or the country that I live in terms of the policies that affect my life, or the environment within which I work. So the MenCare 50/50 commitment is a result of some of the recommendations from the whole series of State of the World's Fathers reports, actually. So Hannah, if we can just go to the next slide, please. And so this is the two covers of the 2019 and the 2021 State of the World's Fathers reports. And the more and more the data looked at how are fathers doing, how are men doing in terms of contributing to care, the more it emerged that it is a structural initiative that needs to happen. We need to think about the systems within which we live. Next slide, please. And here we have some of the lovely social media cards that went along with the State of South Africa, State of the World's Fathers report from 2021. And you'll see there the emphasis on changing the health sectors to be more gender transformative, to also to promote fathers' involvement during pregnancy and delivery of children. And then I'm not going to read through all of them, but I think you get the idea that we need to approach this from various angles. And I do think that a question that I have, or it's not probably a question, it's more like a trend that I'm noticing, which is really encouraging, is that the binary between profit and care seems to be dissolving, where it's not, and I would also tag on to what Gary was saying, it's not necessarily an either or, but maybe it's a both and, about thinking about ways in which businesses can work towards profit and encourage an ethic of care. Of course, in some places, there's really harmful industries that really do need to change their practices. But in other places, profit can also work in the service of care. And I think workplaces changing their practices is one way of doing that. So the MenCare commitment, next slide, please. Coming from the State of the World's Fathers reports, has put in place a set of policy recommendations for government departments, where we are doing two things. We are firstly identifying progressive government departments that have put in place steps like establishing equal, fully paid, non-transferable parental leave. That is the gold standard, and that's quite rare. So most government departments that are engaged in this are actually working towards that. But then also the other ones, and we just had the lovely images that showed all of them, providing state-supported high-quality childcare, transforming health sector institutions, establishing national care policies and campaigns, and expanding social protection programs to be sure to be promoting to all parents, and to make sure that social protection is not only experienced or seen as a female service or support, but that men have a responsibility and interest and need to act as parents using those benefits also. So the commitments are, we are now collecting commitments from government departments. We will announce these later this year at the Women Deliver conference in Kigali, at least the first cohort. And we are collecting commitments from government departments and from employers. So the next slide, please, Hannah. And this is the version that applies the same logic to the workplace. And as I was saying, that if we are thinking about profit as opposed to care, and not necessarily profit in service of care or in collaboration with care, we'll probably won't get very far. But workplaces who are implementing parental leave or are putting more family-friendly workplace policies in place, such as care days. Our colleague at the Company of Dads podcast, Paul Sullivan, really emphasized this point about making care leave days available for undefined moments of care when an employee actually needs to go home. And today, to be frank, was a day like that. Both of my children were in bed, and my partner is working full time, so she was not here. So because I work from home, I could take care of them and actually prepare for this webinar. So remote working, flexi time, etc. And then I think also just to emphasize that, at the moment, we are collecting the stories of employers who are doing things like this, who are putting progressive policies in place. In the EU, the European Union, the EU Directive on Work-Life Balance has had a major influence on this. I was talking to a internet online banking company in Poland yesterday, and they were saying that the EU directive and their ESG policies really impacted how they engage with parents in the workplace. And now they are doing all 5 of these. They are promoting care equality in the company, and they are adding indicators on care equality to their annual reports. And when I asked Mike, the person who was the DEI manager for the company, what was the one thing that nudged this culture of care, he said that it was leadership in the company actually utilizing the policies, setting the example. So anyway, I can talk about this for hours, but I wanted to give you a sense of the different dimensions of the MenCare commitments, and really encourage everybody out there to encourage your employers to make the commitment, but also advocate for this with government departments. I'm going to close with a slide that just shows what our website will look like. And we do not yet have Coca-Cola on board, but we do have, so therefore I put the sample banner over there, but this is what our new website section will look like, where we will show what the commitments are that the companies have made or the government departments have made, the story of why the company made that decision. And I'm very happy to say that we already have some significant employers on board. In Latin America, for example, many colleagues might know the OXXO convenience stores, or the FEMSA company working with beverages in Latin America. And they have confirmed interest in the campaign, and we hope that they will move forward towards the commitments. So let me end there, Diana, and say that is what I want to share now about the commitments, and open to answering any questions about that people might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vessel, and very interesting to see how the State of the World's Fathers report recommendations have transformed or transposed into the 50-50 campaign. Just citing part of your conversation, how it is important for social protection, not only to be seen as a female-only expectation, but that we are all key players in care economy, using my words. It's also interesting on the EU. That's a really interesting best practice. And I hope that there are advocacy measures that are put in place so that we could replicate this approach to other institutions. It's good that their leadership is utilizing and supporting these supportive policies that they have in place. Thank you very much, Vessel. I will zero back to our panelists, Gary, Valentina, Vessel, Tavishi. Do you have any additional recommendations for the field going forward based on the conversations we've had? I open it to you. Any extra reflections or recommendations, panel?
I'll jump in the awkward silent moment. But I do think Valentina sharing the national care plans, I do think as we look at the complexity of the services and the funding that's required from national governments to do it, the taxation that's required as part of it, the collaboration or the obligation of employers to be part of this. I do think national care plans give us a framework in which to do that. If I look at the field of gender-based violence and the allyship around men and boys for that, it's been key that some 80 countries in the world now have national action plans on gender-based violence. And I think countries that have that multi-sectoral plan and they've involved civil society, and civil society is holding them accountable, and we want to see funding go toward that, and we see legislation passed to provide that funding. I think there's lots of examples like that that say we need national plans. The way that where care connects across so many parts of our lives, from employment to the healthcare system, to how we raise boys in schools and policies we have there, to workplaces and labor legislation, et cetera, it tells us that we need those national plans. And I think it's trying to figure out ways that we can be civil society partners who hold governments accountable for those, and that we want to see men demanding side by side with women and non-binary individuals as the activists and really the accountability for putting those plans in place. That makes our jobs a lot more complex than just some encouraging images about men doing more care work. It really does make it the kind of long-term vision that I think the Global Alliance for Care is about, and many of our partners are trying to say, this is not a one-off, this is not one single thing. I think I'm just repeating what I think I've heard before, but that's where I see, can MenCare get men on board as activists for national care policies, I suppose would be my one sentence recommendation.
Thank you very much, Gary. Any other reflections, colleagues?
Valentina, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to switch to Spanish. A mí me gustaría agregar a lo que...
I wanted to add something to what Gary just said. It's very important. This link of civil society and the construction of public policies. I think this is a fundamental issue in Latin America, in the global South countries. We have seen how governments, progressive governments with a gender way of looking at things, they reach their administration, they say they're going to be increasing policies, but with a government transition, those changes are detained, they are stopped, they disappear. So civil society participation is fundamental for us to continue pressure. We don't want to be pulling back, we want to move forward. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is the importance of intersectoral work within governments, this linkage, this link of the different agencies of the work they are doing at the government level. This doesn't usually happen, especially in the global South. This is one of the big flaws, promoting care for everyone needing care activities, so that we can link the work from one government agencies among the different agencies for comprehensive policies for them to be more effective, and the use of resources, as Gary said, this is fundamental for the use of resources to be more effective for us to be able to implement those policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Vessel, any final reflections from you, please?
No, I think just to maybe to tag on to that conversation as well, and just to link to the point that Valentina had made in the presentation, and also covered some of that now on speaking with men as decision makers and as political decision makers. In many countries, the parliamentary or Congress or governance structures are tracking representation in terms of numbers, and aiming for more female representation in the decision-making bodies of countries, but it's less clear what those parliamentarians do once the numbers are quite high, and which ministries they are assigned on, and even less clear which decisions are proposed by necessarily by women or by men, and which are carried, who supports the decisions. And I think that level of analysis is really important for us to see if men are becoming increasingly supportive of social policies that manifest care agendas, so that it's not only seen as the female parliamentarians' roles to lead on social welfare policy making in government. So I think that's also something to look out for at a policy level, and thinking about how we can advocate for. And I think citizens can then ask the question when it's election time, in the past, in the current governance structure, who actually suggested something, who supported it, who made the decisions, and how can we get more of a gender transformative approach to actually implementing the policies as well. So let me, thank you, Diana. I think that's the only thing that I wanted to say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Vessel.
No, I was going to pass the microphone to Tavishi.
Tavishi, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And I wanted to actually just talk about the fact that we are, which has been mentioned before in the beginning of the webinar, is that we're very, very excited. We are going to be launching our State of the World's Fathers 2023 edition at Kigali, Rwanda, as part of the Women Deliver conference. It's in mid-July. And I think one of the most interesting pieces of this State of the World's Fathers is the global partnership that has come together. We have 17 countries, 17 organizations across 17 countries that have come together, who are all working on a common cause to be a part of the data efforts, the messaging, the shifts that we want to make. And so this is probably our largest data collection efforts for State of the World's Fathers yet. Hopefully it will continue. And part of the webinar, as Vessel mentioned, is coming, the recommendations, our caring webinar series is coming from the State of the World's Fathers as well. So we have our co-author, Nikki van der Gaag, in the audience as one of the attendees. So please stay tuned. We will certainly be sharing more and more of that report as we get closer to launching it. And we are launching this in Kigali, but we hope to have many other spaces and events where we can continue to build momentum, bring visibility to this work. And I look forward to sharing more of that as we get through the rest of the year. So thank you so much. Vessel, Diana, back to you.
Thank you very much, Tavishi. We have a number of comments. We have 6 comments in our Q&A. I will need some interpretation facilitation here, as we have 1, 2, 3 comments or questions that are in Spanish. And we have another comment. So as we're just preparing, our translators, are you on board? Yeah. There's a comment from Musiani. MenCare is indeed an idea whose time has come. Caregiving for me as a man has been the story of most of my life, and this webinar means so much to me. I will ensure that I attend the rest of the webinars to learn more about what MenCare does and how I can get involved. Thank you very much, Musiani. Another one from Hernandez. Is it possible for you to share more about your formative research to develop the narrative and some interesting learnings you got in the testing process of the message? So Hernandez, if I could quickly respond to that, and Vessel, you'll back me up. As we continue, as we've been continuously explaining, we will share the slides with you, and the care webinar sessions, the series, are a drum up to the launch of the report. So please keep tuned, stay tuned. Thank you very much. Anyone to interpret our first question?
Maybe Diana, just to come back on Fernanda's question as well about the formative research for MenCare. And I think that goes back to 2010 and 2011, when the initial mapping of the territory of men's caregiving and fatherhood was done to develop the campaign key messages. And we actually launched 10 messages that were focused on things like: you are my father, you take me to antenatal care, you are my father, you spend time playing with me. And the process was very involved, where we worked with organizations predominantly from the Men Engage network to test some of the visuals, to test some of the languaging around this. And we got constant feedback. I have to say, Fernanda, as well, that this is not finished. This is 12 years in the making, and the testing continues. So the formative research and the learning is never over. We are still iterating as we go along. Thank you, Diana. Let me pass back for the Spanish questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Interpretation of Spanish questions, please.
Do you want me to help out?
Yeah, please,
Yes,
Valentina.
Sure. Jorge Leon, he is asking why to reduce the work of men to paternity. It is important to consider in the a broad perspective of care, where it includes taking care of families, for amplified families, friends, the neighborhood, the community, and even the planet and nature.
Did we get that? Why
Tavishi?
reduce the paternity? Vessel, did you get that?
Yeah, I was seeing Tavishi nodding.
Yeah, I was nodding. Yeah, it's a lovely question, and it just sits so beautifully into our upcoming State of the World's Fathers. Hence, you can see me nodding, and Vessel has passed the mic to me. Absolutely. I think that we are starting from the premise that essentially care means caring for all the relationships that you're in. There's been a lot of focus, particularly as a result of COVID, on people having to care for their elderly parents, caring for people who are unwell around them, their relatives, their family members. And I think we do kind of come from this very deep ethics of care perspective, that care is like a central part of who we want the world to be. We want people to kind of embody all aspects of care. Men are more than just fathers, and we know that, right? And we know that men are also part of multiple relationships, their close friendships, in their relationships with their partners, and we want care to be part of those relationships as well. When it comes to fatherhood, you know, we have seen in our programmatic work as well that it's often when men are at that cusp of change that they're so kind of most amenable to change. So when they're, you know, they're about to become fathers, they're most amenable to change at that time as well. And so fatherhood is a space and time when we really feel like we could kind of come in at that like little crux when they're changing and say, hey, this is a time when we can shift norms, we can shift the way they're thinking. But beyond that too, you know, we know that when we have men be more involved caregivers and fathers, it benefits everybody. It benefits children, women, but it also benefits men themselves. So I don't think we want to sort of reduce men to only being fathers and carers. And we are trying to push the boundaries of what care means and for what care means for men in our upcoming SOWF, but also like not taking away the fact that when we look at men as caregivers in their father role, that we're going to see a lot of benefits. Women do continue to do a much, much, much higher proportion of unpaid care work. So we do need men to kind of step up and be more equitable kind of, you know, caregivers. So I think my answer is yes, we are pushing the boundaries, but without taking away the important role that men have to play as fathers. So I will obviously pass the mic also to Gary and Vessel, who are also co-authors on this report, but just it's lovely to hear that you are touching upon something that we are also beginning to touch upon in our work.
Thank you very much, Tavishi. Gary, any reflections?
Just to underline what Tavishi said there of, you know, I think it is about shifting a culture of care and continuing to emphasize that it's the end. I think the care by men for those in their households is key. It is, and from our own data and others, you know, some 2/3 to 3/4 of the world's men have some care involvement like that. So we emphasize, you know, how important that is for households and for the individuals who need that care. but never forgetting that it must also include how do we build an ethic and a political platform and a political imperative that men see ourselves as caring far beyond our nuclear household. So it's, again, it's not, and Tavishi, I think you know, and you're leading the thinking of this for the study around the also building an ethic of care that men perceives ourselves as fragile and vulnerable and humans who also need care, that all these things are connected. So absolutely believe it. And one of our key recommendations in the report that you'll soon see is also around what do we do starting with boyhood and with boys, around creating this idea that care shouldn't be gendered. It should be human, and human in our connection to the planet as well. So that really is the big vision that we hold out for this. I think we absolutely need to do a lot more thinking of what are the political and policy implications of us expanding that definition of care. And I hope we can talk about that as this report comes out and as MenCare 50/50, is focusing a lot on men doing the care in homes and of those in our families. But how do we use that to turn into this broader ethic and political imperative for care? I think to me, that's kind of the question of where MenCare goes from here.
Thank you very much, Gary. In the interest of time, can we just focus back on the Q&As as well? There was another question from Jorge.
Yes.
Valentino, would you like to read that for us? Thank you.
Yes. Jorge Leon is saying at the individual level, there are, and small groups, there are changes, but the changes are still very few. There aren't important changes in the social structure or systemic changes. What strategy should we implement to include men in building more equal societies?
Can I pass this over to Vessel to respond, please?
Sure.
What strategies?
No, thanks, Diana. And I noticed that question was asked quite early in the webinar. So I think we have already also presented on some of that. But it's I think Jorge, that's a really important question for us. The strategies would be to think about workplaces. How can employers start to make changes in the jobs that we're engaging in, particularly post-COVID? I think we've become more sensitive to that. And then also to think about the educational system is one that we didn't spend much time talking about today, but let me just explain that a little bit. In terms of early childhood development, both in terms of the early childhood development centers, firstly offering high quality subsidized childcare to children so that mothers are released from the duty or the expected duty to care for children as a first imperative, but then secondly also to use that as an access point to fathers, to encourage fathers to become more involved in caregiving and in spending time with the children in their education and care. And then thirdly, to also think about ECD, early childhood development institutions, as a career pathway for men, and as a way to institutionalize men's caregiving, and also as a way to normalize that, so that children also grow up with caring, trusting men that they see around them, and that it doesn't subconsciously build this expectation that, oh, men are outside of the caring space, but that they are very present in children's lives as carers, as paid caregivers. I'm not sure if Valentina or Tavishi or Gary want to also add on to that one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive, Vessel, and I do completely agree with you. Normalize men as parent structures within the ECD sector, and also encourage men to be more supportive. That's where we need to go. And thank you, Tavishi and Gary. I will just quote, pushing the boundary on the culture of care, and care should not be gendered. It should be human. I like that very much. This point, I will call upon Vessel to kindly guide us on next webinar details, announcements.
Sure. Thank you so much, Diana, and colleagues. Just a massive thank you to everybody for participating in this, and for all of the participants in the webinar. A big thank you to the Global Alliance for Care for co-hosting this first one with us. It was really important to us to start this from a collaborative point of view, as we're looking at the entire system of care. We will then go into more of the webinar as we go along through the rest of the year. But just to firstly say a massive thank you. The first slide, also just Tavishi was saying this earlier, but just to repeat that a little bit, the one on that you're seeing on the screen at the moment lists the various webinars as we're going through the year. The next one will be hosted by Oxfam US and Cómplices por la Igualdad from Mexico. Since today is also offered bilingually, we are mostly presenting in English and translating to Spanish. We are very excited to announce that that one will be presented in Spanish and translated to English. So for all of the Spanish-speaking participants, please join us again. And also, I think we will once again distribute this through the Global Alliance for Care Network and the MenCare listservs. I did say this earlier, but I do want to also say that each of the webinars will get a dedicated page on the MenCare website with the slides and the reports that we are citing and the data that we are citing as we are going along. The second one is to revolutionize the way boys are taught about care, and Gary had alluded to that with our aligned campaign on the Global Boyhood Initiative. But I do want to point to the invest in care and measure it, disaggregated by gender, social class, and age. That one will be towards the end of September. But that is the key webinar where we will focus on the findings from the State of the World's Fathers report. So let's go to the next slide. Or the previous slide. Yeah, the previous one, the Women Deliver one. Just thank you, Hannah. Just to say that the actual report, the State of the World's Fathers report, will be launched in person at the Marriott Hotel in Kigali during the Women Deliver conference. It's coming up now in July. I'm very happy that it's happening on 18th July because I am South African, and 18th July is International Mandela Day, for those of you who don't know. So it's wonderful to have the report released on Mandela Day. And we will then have that report available publicly on the website, and events like the webinar I mentioned in September will be moments where you can actually hear more about it. This is only the first launch. The team that's promoting the report have decided to actually do a world tour. So please keep in touch with Equimundo, Sonke, MenCare communication channels to hear about the other opportunities where we will be having in-person or online events to give attention to the report. I think that's it for now. And thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Diana, for a wonderful moderation. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And see you at the next webinar.
Yes.
Looking forward to the report.